Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our fifth night of seminars. Tonight I'm going to bring to you the Lely Discovery Collector 120 and its effect on barn cleanliness, and a bit of information about the product and the validation process we go through. So this is just a bit of a run through of tonight's topic. I'm going to be introducing you to the Lely Centre Midlands team, the importance of manure removal, the Lely Collector validation process, working principles of the Lely Collector, the dump pit, a farmer's view, and a question and answers. So our team, Lely Centre Midlands, is 21 strong team. It's made up of full-time and part-time employees. So that's service, admin, sales, management, a lot of different people with all various dairy backgrounds. The main depot is in Stafford, and as you can see, it's just there. And there are hubs in Cheshire, St Clyde's in South Wales, and Leicestershire. We support 250 astronauts, 8 vector tubs, and 20 collectors and counting. So before I talk about the Lely Collector, I thought it was interesting to talk about the importance of regular manure removal and why we need this and why we need regular cleaning intervals. And obviously feet is a massive reason why. You know, if there's above 25 millimeters of muck on the floor, slurry depth has a major influence on digital dermatitis and any bacteria that can be collected in the shed. If there's any pooling of slurry, it's going to have a major effect on that. And this will again affect udder hygiene. If they're dragging muck off that hasn't been regularly taken out of the passageways, they'll be taking it onto the beds, which will affect udder hygiene. It'll affect overall cleanliness of the cow's body. And one study found that E. coli can survive for 24 hours up to 40 days in the cowshed environment. So it is really essential that the muck is removed from the pastures. And interestingly, when the Lely Collector was validated in Northern Ireland, so before commercial use, 10% less bedding was used on the 2 farms in Northern Ireland through using the Lely Collector. So there is definitely cleaner beds and less bedding. And also, as you can see, there'll be no pooling of slurry with the Lely Collector. I've just used 2 examples of systems, so there's the Lely Collector and the automatic scraping, and just to show the difference, really. I think you can make your own minds up about that one. Moving on to putting labour to more effective use. This is actually a tweet that was from one of our farmers who has 2 collectors, and it says, "Robots hard at it at 5 AM today. Shame the one that's taken the photo was as well." So it just shows if you've got collectors doing the cubicles and the areas that the cows aren't in, you can have that labour source in the milking parlour or feeding the cows. You don't have to have someone in the on the tractor and milking the cows as well. So I think it's more effective use. And also having tractor running around, if you don't have to have the cows moved into a collecting yard or moved out of the way with a collector, you can just have the collector running about where the cows are, so it's not as disruptive. And then we go on to the collector validation process, and this is quite a long process, but it's very consistent with getting the best results for the standard of cleaning. And what we do is initially we'll have a site visit, and that's looking at floors, bedding, shed design, and the overall suitability of the collector within the shed. This leads on to a drawing, and we will do a drawing of the desired area for the collector that you want it to do. And then once we've got a drawing, we can work out the calculation by routing and finding out how much muck will be going through that collector to give you a proposal and the solution for your shed. So it's a really comprehensive process, and what we want to aim for is the best cleaning standard. So bedding materials, the majority of our collectors are on sawdust, which is really good. And we do have a few other different beddings. So chopped straw, as long as it's a short chop and it's below 5 centimetres, no more, it will be absolutely fine. If it is longer straw, then you do find that the front of the collector will push straw, and it won't give you as most effective cleaning results. Gypsum and paper are also friendly for the collector, as long as it's not going to be a massive clumps pulled off the bed. So as long as it's mainly slurry going into the collector, it's absolutely fine. And on the bottom side here, we have sand. We know what a great bedding material sand is. However, at the moment, it's not validated for collector, but as it says, watch this space, because there is trials and development of trying to get the collector to be validated on sand beds. And also green bedding is okay as well. So when an advisor comes out to farm, they will do a site overview, and we'll be looking into the cubicle sheds or the areas that you want the collector to work in. And on the left hand side, you can see a collector, and it's just traveling down the heel-stone there, and heel-stones need to be a minimum of 12.5 centimeters. So the ultrasonic sensors know where the collector is, and it can bounce the ultrasonic navigation off there, so it knows where it is. And then we'll be looking for a dump hole. So if you look in the middle picture, there's a cow shed, and ideally, if we need a wall flow of 3 meters, so 15-foot bays, 20-foot bays. If we've got something like that, we can follow and have a dump hole there, and tee into a channel. If that's not there on the farm, then we will look for another solution, and we will try and work with the farmer to find the best place for a dump hole and the most efficient place for the roots of the collector as well. Also, when we are in the sheds, we'll be doing measurements, and we'll be looking to see where there are channels in the sheds or slats, because that has a massive effect on the capacity of the machine. And the more accurate we can get the calculator, the better the outcome. And also, rubber flooring will work with the collector, as long as if it is conjoining with concrete. There is no more than a 1 centimetre step, so it's quite a smooth lip onto the concrete, so the collector just glide over. And also with slopes, it's a 3% slope is no more than it can handle because of the balancing systems on the collector, and when they are full, they're around 750 kilos, so we have to be careful with slopes. So the flatter the shed, the better, but we will work with what we've got. But that's very essential. If we're on farm, we need to measure what the slopes are in the sheds. And then once we've got this information, we can put together a shed drawing, and the shed drawing is essential for working out cleaning intervals, routes, the best place to put a dump hole, and working out if you do have crossovers and they're raised, whether we could do any building modifications to make it better for the collection and more efficient run. So as you can see on this one, there are slats and channels which will affect the capacity, and there are also crossovers where the machine can go around and they're not raised, so it's more efficient for the collector. And Lely will state on a solid floor, so no slats and no channels, that the collector can cater for 100 cows and 500 square metres of solid floor. And as I've mentioned, the capacity can be maximised if there is slats and channels in the shed. So it's very important that we do a drawing so that we can work out in the calculator how many cows the collector can cater for. And you'll see in the next slide about calculator. So with the calculator, we'll put the number of cows in that desired area, the manure production, which if there is different breeds, you know, if you have a Jersey and a Holstein, we understand that there'll be less muck coming from those cows, so we can tweak that, and it gives us how much they think they'll be in the muck they'll be in the shed. And then once we've got that, we can put into the barn drawing page the measurements of the shed, and we'll be able to then work out through putting in if there's a dead end, if there's raised crossovers, slatted parts of the shed. We can prioritise routes. And I'll just go back to the barn drawing. Lely state that, and they advise that there should be a cleaning interval of every 2 hours, and that's on places of high cow traffic or where there will be more muck. So heel-stones, for example, will definitely be every 2 hours, and then behind where a cow is eating, that'll be every 2 hours. But places in front where there isn't much muck, we can get away with sort of every 4 to 6 hours. On crossovers, slightly less, and also where there is slats, the collector can be doing that less. And just to note, when the collector is on slats, it does turn its vacuum off, or can do, so that it will push with its blade on the front and effectively, like a Lely Disco 90, just push the muck over the slats, so it's more efficient for the machine. And on a side note as well, when the collector is on slats, it can dump partial loads of its muck. so it won't be needing to go back to a dump pit to dump all of its muck, giving it greater capacity in the shed. So once we've in our length and width of the shed and what's in the shed, we then do a drawing, and we'll use the drawing that we've done initially, and we colour code it, and then this will give you a global capacity, so what the machine can really do in that shed, and it gives you how many litres of manure it's going to be sucked, the area that's going to be travelling, the time that it's dumping, the cleaning rounds, quite a lot of useful information there. And then it will give us the capacity, so it will give you the solution for the area that you want the collector to work in. And then once we have this information, because it's the validation process, we send this on to other colleagues in Lely, and they will go through it and make sure that that collector, through other photos that we take on farm, will be validated for the shed and can work to the best of its ability. So going on from the validation process, we go to the working principles of the Lely collector, and as you'll know, it navigates the shed and it collects muck. Water is sprayed from the front and the rear, and within the shed there is no obstacles, so it's maximum flexibility. We don't have to put any infrastructure apart from a dump hole with the collector, because it's an autonomous vehicle and it will follow the routes that are set. So the first picture on the left shows that the collector has a straight front, and that's for more precise cleaning around corners, and there's a rounded back, and that's for maximising while cleaning the surface while turning. And because the machine can perform without going backwards, the manure is collected from the front, keeping the floor behind very clean. So it does collect the muck, it does not push muck unless it's going over slats. And the speed of the machine is 100 to 200 millimeters per second. And interestingly, when Lely were developing this machine, there was 13 patents brought out to make the machine work. So it really is one of a kind, and it's taken a lot of work, and that's why there is such a comprehensive validation period for it, because it's got to have that desired cleaning standard. Just a bit of information about the power. The average power consumption is 3 kilowatts per day, and that equates to 33 pence per day, so it's a very efficient machine to run. There is one 12-volt battery that's in the front of this machine. As you can see, the hood is lifted and the 12-volt battery will fit in there. And the machine works on a 40% driving to 60% charging ratio, and the maximum charge is 6 hours. And the machine will not leave the charger unless it's 50% charged, because when it's running around and doing its routes, one thing we don't want it to do is go on a route and not have enough charge to get back. So it's always making sure that it can go on a route and it can get back safely to the charger. And there are 2 electric motors, each motor drives 1 wheel. So in the front there is a vacuum pump, a water pump, electrics and the battery, and also there's the ultrasonic sensors in the front, so the collector can navigate where it is. Talking about navigating, the collector has 2 ultrasound sensors, and these measure the distance to the wall or the nearest object, whether that be a heel stone, a feed fence, concrete panel. And then there's a gyroscope, and that detects the driving direction, along with advanced software technology to keep it going in the right direction and making the most effective and efficient routes. And how it knows how far it's travelled, it works it out on the number of wheel revolutions. And the ultrasonic sensors, they will go as far as 2.5 meters from the collector to the obstacle. So if you can imagine, the collector is 1.2 meters wide. From one edge, there is 2.5 meters to the next obstacle, where it can accurately detect and drive around the shed very reliably. So if you do have quite a large area that you want to do, if you can always remember it's got 2.5 meters from each side, then that's always a good guide. And bump points are really essential, because it gives it a lot more reliable navigation. And so the collector, as long as it's got concrete panels or it's got heel stones or gates, things like that, it can bump into there, know where it is, and it will be effectively carrying on its routes. And there is no additional modifications to the bar needed with the collector. One thing to note as well, if you do have gates, the collector does need, with the ultrasonic sensors, to bounce off and things. So if you have gates where it can't bounce off, it's ideal to have them sheeted so it knows where it is, and it just affects the reliability if they weren't sheeted. So it's quite essential. So inside the tank, as you can see, there's a collector on the left-hand side docking up to the water filling station. And then on your right-hand side, you've got inside there with the 70-litre water bags. So water can be sprayed out of the front and the rear of the machine. So out of the front, it will make for a smoother, more smoother transport into the machine, and also out of the back, it will in summer, if you've got a brisk wind or it's dry, the muck will not smear. You can turn the water on and off. So if you've got a certain route where there's too much water lying, you can turn the water off. It's not an issue. And if it's a particularly cold night, if it's frosty and you don't want water to be sprayed because it might freeze over, you can turn it off as well. And the bottom picture is where the machine docks into the water and fills up, which happens when it's on its dump pit. So it's quite an efficient process because as it's dumping, it will be connecting to the water as well. The collector, as I said before, is 750 kilos full. So it's quite a hefty piece of weight when it's full of manure. And it's 390 kilos empty, leaving 360 litres of muck capacity. So over a 24-hour period, it does collect quite a lot of muck. And it will, if you're a fully solid 4, be carrying that muck right until it gets to the dump pit. But if you do have slats and channels, it may not be collecting that muck and having a full tank the whole time. It all depends on what infrastructure you have in the shed. So routes and travelling between sheds. On the left-hand side, there is a picture of one of our engineers, and he was routing a collector down in South Wales there. And speaking to them, it takes around 3 days to fine-tune the machine and get it routed, to go around the shed and happy with what the farmer he wants for his desired area. So it is quite a long process, but we want to get it right. And there may be parts of the shed that you find there's more muck in that you hadn't noticed before if you were scraping out with a tractor or auto scrapers, that you've now noticed that you're working with a collector, because we'll put in our routes that are most efficient. But if there is a route where there's more muck than another and you want that doing in greater intervals, then we can sort that out. We can come back and tweak it. So it's all working with the farmer to provide the best cleaning standard. So the collector will start every route at the charger and ends at a charger, and the routes are scheduled for a daily rhythm. So if you have an area of the shed that once or twice a day you've got high cow traffic and you don't want the collector going through there, we can alter the routes or set up routes that affect this, and we can work around it and make the collector efficient in another area at that time. We can also do a summer and winter plan. So if you're not intensive and your cows are out during the summer, we can make the most of the collector in the summer and do, say, the collecting yard or an area that you need doing with high volumes of muck, and then in the winter it can go back to its winter route, so it's being used most effectively. And also between sheds, collectors can work, and we've got some really great innovations from our farmers in the 2 pictures below of effectively a collector cat flap, so they can go between sheds. And it is important to note when they do need to be fully gated, just for health and safety reasons. And if you have got groups, you can transport the collector in the shed between the groups if there is a clearance of at least 65 centimetres, so the collector can go under a gate. So that's quite important, but it's not restricting the use of the collector. And how they are routed, the collectors are not in a zigzag format. They like to stick to 90 degrees if they can, so that's a better cleaning standard. And they can be easily operated by a smartphone by downloading the Lely Control app. And they can be work wirelessly through Bluetooth on an Android phone. So this allows you, if you needed to change the timings of the routes there and then in the shed. If you see a route with more muck, you can change the time and say, I want this to be done in the next hour rather than in the next 2 hours. So it's really flexible, and each smartphone in the barn can be used to control the collector. So it's not just on one person. If you're not on the farm that day, whoever is on the farm can connect to the collector, and you can also drive the collector manually. So the dump pit, and as I said before, it's the only part of the installation that the engineers will not do. They do the cage and the charger and everything else, but the actual dump pit we send you a specification to build that, and as you can see, it's a width of 1.2 meters and a length of 0.5 meter, and it will look like the picture on the right, empty. And the collector will drive in here, and after it's entered the dump pit, there'll be an aeration valve which opens, and that releases all the muck. And usually if it's a full tank, it'll take 2 minutes, but if, like I said before, if there's slats or channels in the shed and it's released the muck over those, there may not be a full tank, so it takes as long as what's in the tank, basically. And once that muck has been let out, the aeration valve then drains condensed water from the vacuum system, and the collector will leave the dump pit, the valve closes, and the water pump and the vacuum turn on, and the route is then resumed. And so it's really important to note on this picture on the left that the collector does need a 3 meter wall follow, because when it is docking, it needs to be precisely driving into that water point. So that's why it needs to be able to follow that 3 meters in. And as you can see in the picture in the middle, that's what it should look like from the side view when it's dumping. And if we cannot find a site for a dump pit, but you do have an area where you could possibly dump off the lagoon, dump off into the lagoon, that is another possibility, as you can see here in the far right hand corner. The only issue we found with that one is that you do need a 3 meter wall follow, and sometimes it isn't possible, but if it's in a corner, it could follow the corner. So it is very important to note that 3 meters of wall follow. But that's basically the dump pit. And we've got kindly had a farmer's view from Liggins, a Fulmer farm, and this family, they milk with robots, and they have a loose house barn, and I think they would have to interrupt the cows through scraping with the tractor and things like that, so it's affected visits and things like that, whereas with the collector, it does its own routine, it doesn't affect the cows. And although they have chopped and unchopped straw, they haven't seen any issues. It's worked really well, and it's navigated its way really well around water troughs, foot crushes and gates, and these guys are really happy with it, and it's allowing them to put labour on other jobs on the farm. So that's a little brief overview of the collector. If you have any questions, I'll be very willing to answer those.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Lizzy.
No worries.
So if anybody has any questions, if you could put it in the chat, that would be brilliant. Let's have a look now. Okay, brilliant. So we've got one question for you, Lizzy, so far, and it says, what is the longevity of the collector?
So when we look at this, we'd like to think, if you look at Lely A2 robots, they've been out over 25 years now, and we'd like to think the collector could be about for as long as that, and it's a fully stainless steel machine, so there's no reason why it shouldn't be. So if we look for at least 20 years, that would be a sensible answer.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. And okay, so the next question in the chat is, if the shed has 50% slats and 50% solid floor, can the 100 cow capacity be increased?
Yeah, so I think that really reiterates the importance of going on the farm, doing a site visit, getting the measurements, putting it through the calculator, because until we know what the calculator is going to give us, we can't say whether you can do 100 cows strictly or we can do slightly more, because we do definitely know, and we've got examples of this out there in the field, that the more slats in the shed, we can do more than 100 cows, but it all depends on the shed and putting it through that calculator. That's why the validation process is so important, and I did talk quite a lot on that one. So yeah, if you did have 50% slatted shed and 50% concrete or solid floor, then the likelihood that you can do more of 100 cows is, yeah, definitely. And probably without seeing the site or doing the calculations, you'd be looking 120 to 130 certainly if 50% is slatted. So yeah, it's all dependent on a site visit, and you know, we're very keen to get out there and look at these sites just to find a solution for the farmer.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
No worries.
And if there's no more questions, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Lizzy.
Yeah, just a little side note, there's not % finance available at the moment on barn products, so that does include the Lely Collector. So when we're on a site visit, if you want us to come out, we can go through that as well. So that's not a problem. And also next week there is Fertility and Getting More Active, which is the 1st of July, so please join. Thank you.